$300 trillion of bonds in the world and only something like 180 trillion of stocks in the world.
What about the forex market?
What about it?
Isn't it bigger than the bond market?
Very likely. Derivatives markets. So, let's see, foreign exchange. There are foreign exchange derivatives, and there's probably also direct foreign exchange contracts. I don't know about either of those two markets specifically, but I know derivatives in general represent so much more than any kind of financial assets, because you can write a derivative on anything. A financial asset, you have to have actually something physical that you're selling or buying or agreeing to sell or agreeing to buy. But derivatives, I can write you a derivative. I can write you a contract that says, if this marker breaks, I'll pay you $5, or chalk, or whatever, and that's a derivative. And we don't have to exchange the chalk.
What about currency markets?
What about this, Sam?
Aren't they a large leader in like investments? Like, isn't it growing more than any other market? Like money being invested into currency exchange than almost any other market?
I will take your word for it. I haven't heard that yet, but I'm interested in it. I'll look it up, and I'll hope to get you a more concrete answer by next class. But that makes sense. There's a lot of probably speculation on which economies, and basically, as what is volatility? Does anyone know what I mean when I use the term volatility?
Fluctuation in the price of.
Fluctuation in price. Volatility in finance is synonymous with risk. The two mean the same. So as volatility increases, as risk increases, that means that different people have different valuations, right? A riskier asset, naturally some people are going to feel that, hey, this asset's going to produce this much, this asset's going to produce that much, right? There's going to be a higher discrepancy in people's opinions than a safer asset. Safer asset, everyone knows that this bond by the United States government is going to pay its 5% or 2% coupon payments every 6 months. There's very little risk, there's very little volatility in that, so when people price these financial assets, they all basically agree on the price. In times of economic turmoil around the globe, like the times that are going on right now, there's a lot of volatility. There's a lot of people that say Greece will be able to pay its debt. There's a lot of people that say Greece will not be able to pay its debt. Those two people have two very different fundamental values on Greek debt. And so that's just Greek debt. And when we're talking about the euro currency, part of the value of that currency derives from whether or not Greece is going to be able to pay its debt. Because if Greece defaults, Italy might default. If Italy defaults, Portugal will probably default, and so on, etc., and the euro can collapse. So when you say that foreign exchange markets are getting bigger and bigger, not a total surprise to me because of the amount of uncertainty in markets right now, particularly with Europe, but other countries as well. So it's not something that's in this bond section of the book, but that being said, it might be important to know. I'll look it up and I'll give you guys a better answer. So, you look it up? Yeah. Then I'll let you give us a better answer when you can.
You're saying bond markets are much more important than stocks.
I am saying that from a particular dimension, the dimension of market capitalization, bond markets are much more important than stocks.
Because they're contracts. And stocks are not so much the contract thing. But
well,
bonds, there's laws behind it that things have to be paid for, as opposed to stocks where even if you invest, you don't necessarily have to have your money back.
so everything you said is true, except I would question the statement that stock is not a contract. I think that you contractually own a company. That company is not required contractually to make any payments for you, but they are required contractually to act in your best interests as a partial owner. So I'm not sure that that's not a contract, but I think that's a very minor point of what you were saying. I think what you're saying is valid, is that generally there's a lot more certainty in bonds. There's a lot more certainty if a bond says that the coupon payment will be 5%, depending on the bond, but an expectation you take all bonds and pull together, probably something like 99% of the time, the coupon payment that you will actually get will be 99%. Will be 5%, yeah. In contrast, if analysts for stock companies say that, oh, you know, we think this company is gonna have earnings per share of $2.50. It's gonna be a lot more volatility in there. Sometimes they'll have earnings per share of $2.75. Sometimes they'll completely miss it and not even pay a dividend, or have a loss per share. So that all gets to the fact that, Sam?
Says according to the Bank for International Settlement, foreign exchange trading increased an average of 5.3 trillion a day. Forex is the largest and most liquid market in the world.
That's insane. That's pretty interesting.
Is it also because the foreign market deals with currency? If you check there, there's currency involved behind the forex market, right?
Yeah, well, it's
That's what's
currency,
caused
yeah,
by
that's
the
what I'm saying, it's
currency.
because of the currency.
Uh-huh.
That's what's making it so large, because
But it
it's
grows
so.
by 5.3 trillion a day? Sounds
Well,
exciting.
Average
also because-
exchange increased to an average of 5.3 trillion a day.
Increase
Two,
two in
average,
average.
two.
Okay,
Average,
okay,
okay.
5.3 trillion a day.
Alright.
Well, Mr.
To put this in perspective, this averages out to $220 billion per hour.
You can have similar staggering statistics about bond trading.
Yeah, that's what I've always,
Yeah, no, that's valuable
No,
information.
man.
I appreciate you.
currency is the
Mr.
largest trade.
Littov there mentioned that central banks play a big role into, sorry, what's Luke?
Doctor.
Doctor.
Doctors don't like when you go.
Dr. Littov.
It's okay.
Well, he mentioned that central banks play a big role also in foreign exchange markets. They're in there,
Yeah.
that is as far as to gain
And
profit, but
I think saying central banks play a large role in the foreign exchange market really masks the true phenomenon. The true phenomenon is everybody in the world buys US dollars. Most US dollars are not in the United States. Most US dollars are in Saudi Arabia and China. So it's.
Is that because they buy our debt, or why is that?
Actually, yeah, probably, yeah, because if you buy US debt, you have to pay, pretty sure you have to pay in US dollars. But it's also because it's pretty much the only currency that people
Sustainable.
really think for sure is not gonna go down significantly. But I'll let you guys be the judge of that, I don't know. Smarter people than me say that. Okay, so that's foreign exchange markets, we'll get there, it's important, but switching gears back to bond markets are much bigger than stock markets. Another reason why bond markets are bigger than stock markets is because who gets to issue bonds and who gets to issue stock? Who gets to issue stock?
Companies,
Yes. Who gets to issue bonds?
government and companies,
Anybody.
anybody.
well, not.
Well, I couldn't. but-
Publicly traded bonds, government and yeah, and so federal government, state governments, and companies. So basically, you just have more people that can issue something. So almost mechanically, it's going to be bigger. I shouldn't say almost mechanically. Also, I was wondering whether or not I should propose to you. But let's do this thought exercise. It's a bit off topic, but it's kind of interesting, I think. So, from a company's perspective, okay? A company can issue stock, or a company can issue a bond. Okay? Think about it as you are the owner of a company. Alright?
You wanna issue bonds?
Well, I would hesitate to make any sort of unconditional statement, but, okay. If you are worried about safety as an owner of a company, are you going to issue stock or a bond?
Safety, what do you mean by safety then?
Safety. So, issuing which instrument gives you less risk? I heard bonds. Can somebody justify bonds? A lot of people said bonds, so what's a good reason for bonds?
We only have two choices.
Yeah. So what's a good reason that you didn't pick the other choice?
Because
What's not involved? The price, but you're a company, you're issuing.
who gives who risk, the company?
We have.
Yes,
we
from
have
a company's perspective.
We have a guy.
Mario?
Because if you issue a stock, it is more volatile than if you issue a bond.
What do you mean, it's more volatility, what is more volatility?
The stock.
The stock's what?
Price.
The stock's price is more volatile, right? But if you're issuing a stock, you sort of kind of get to make the rules. You're gonna say, I mean, in conjunction with, your underwriters and investors in the market, you're gonna say, I am gonna put out 100 shares of my company, and I think you guys are gonna pay me $100 for each share. So if I came to that estimate using some good fundamental analysis, chances are my counterparty, the investors, will come to a pretty similar estimate. So when we talk about stock price volatility, we talk about volatility after the stock has been issued. We talk about one trader trading with another trader, what are the price that this trader wants to sell his stock to that trader for. From a company's perspective, let's forget about CEO options and CEO stock bonuses and stuff, but from a company's perspective, once they issued the stock already, it doesn't matter if the stock sells for $3 or $300. That company's not seeing a dime of it. That's just how valuable the stock market thinks that company is. So when you're a stockholder and you're issuing the stock, you don't really need to worry about stock price volatility. Shelley? Yes, there is that risk, but again, you can control that. Right? For instance, the CEO for Facebook, Mark Zuckerberg.
25 to 1.
What's that?
25 to 1 voting rights, right?
25, yeah. So he issued a bunch of stock, but no one can actually control what he does. I think Google's the same way. You have 3 shares of stock, and that's stuff that you'll learn in corporate finance or business finance. But in general, you can avoid that. So as a manager, you don't really have to worry about that. That comes into play when you have when you've already gone way too far and issued way too much stock, and somehow investors collectively team up against you. But that's a very rare circumstance. You're right, it's important to think about, but it's not really the main risk. When I'm talking about risk, I mean like day-to-day operations. Okay? So if you issue stock, basically what happens is someone gives you money for this nebulous concept, ownership. They own part of your company. Yeah, you don't have to pay anything. They can own your company as long as they want. You can run it to the ground, and you will have used that money. If you run it to the ground maliciously or do something absurdly stupid, then they can sue you. But if it's just general business risk, you don't have any problems. In contrast, if you issue a bond, you are contractually obligated to pay them, as Ismail was saying. So you have more risk. You have less free cash flow. You have committed some of your cash flow to paying bondholders. So from a safety perspective, stock is safer. How about which instrument, from a company's perspective, is more financially lucrative, and why? You can sell bonds from a higher price? I don't necessarily agree. First of all, we'd have to price for what? So for instance, penny stocks, I'm not
Is it because you can use leverage with bond as with the company? You can only, you buy so much of it, but you control so much more, whatever it is you're aiming for. Because I've heard leverage being a big thing for bonds.
Leverage is a thing for bonds, but what leverage means is you amplify your risks, and you amplify your returns, and you amplify your losses. That's why leverage was. So basically, if I have a lever, what in physics a lever is, I can exert some amount of force on here with my hand, but if I exert less force for this, it'll move it.
Okay.
So that's, I practice every day. So that's leverage, right? And so the same concept holds in leverage with bonds. If you issue, and if you guys want, I can show you later why that works in the income statement, but if you issue bonds, then when times are good, you only have a fixed payment, and everything else is yours. But when times are bad, you eat into your money real quick because you have to pay some people some stuff, because you still have that fixed payment. So that gets to the safety argument. So leverage, risk, that's all what makes bonds riskier than stocks. But why it's more financially lucrative is because as a stockholder, you have a share of the profits. If you are the only stockholder, you get all the profits. If you issue another share of stock, You have to split the profits in half. You get half of the profits, they get the other half. So everything that you've worked for, all the residuals, you have to split more. So it's generally thought of as less costly to just commit yourself to a 5% payment or something, whatever your coupon rate is on the bond that you issue, and keep the profits on the limited amount of shareholders, instead of having to split the profits with more and more people. So from a financially lucrative perspective, bonds are more financially lucrative, right?
Because they cap the gross.
Because they what?
They cap the gross percent. They cap the returns. They cap the equity that's going back to the, bondholder.
Yes.
They give you a certain amount, and that's it, they cap it.
Yes, but the bondholders' returns are capped.
Yeah.
Yes, I agree, yep. Versus the stockholders' returns that he doesn't have to split, okay? Now think about it from the investor's perspective. And the easy way to, bless you. Bless you. Okay? I'll forget about the easy real quick. Investors have R's at the end. If you are worried about the safety of your investments, are you going to be more likely to invest in a stock or a bond? Bond. And why is that?
They're less volatile.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's.
Because it's a promise, you have to pay your bond back versus the increase and decrease in the value of that stock fluctuating.
Yeah, exactly.
A bond is like a fixed.
Secured income,
coupon.
right?
It's what?
Like secured income that you are gonna be.
Yeah, you're basically locking in. Of course, there's default risk there, and there's default risk in an equity investment as well. But you're basically locking in your income. So
Where stocks can go anywhere.
the investor,
What about the risk involved with interest rates, with bonds? As an investor, I would be worried about as far as the yields on the bonds, if they fluctuate too much.
and you do have to worry about that. But why would the yields fluctuate? Let's go through this exercise here.
Interest rates?
Okay, so, if you're a bondholder, you've invested your money in a bond that's gonna pay you 5% a year, are you worried about rates going up or down?
Worried about rates going up?
You're worried about rates going up, because the new market rate for that bond might be 7 or 8%, right? Why would rates go up?
Well, there's, goes back to the money in the system, money in the economy, as far as how much or how little of it is.
Yeah. The biggest sort of practical day-to-day reason that rates go up is inflation, right? So inflation pushes rates up. But what happens to the value of your investment in a stock if rates go up?
There shouldn't be much going on to it. As far as the inflation with stocks are supposedly doing better than inflation. Stocks are supposed to be beating inflation overall.
Stocks beat inflation just because the return for stocks is that much higher. But if you invested $50 in a stock and there's inflation, is anything gonna happen to the value of your investment?
Your purchasing power is gonna decrease.
Your purchasing power is gonna decrease, but the value of your investment, is anything gonna happen to that?
They'll give me back my $50, so that's what you're saying.
It's still worth $50. So basically, it doesn't matter to you whether you invested your money in a bond or in a stock. If you put $1,000 in either one, and we get a rate increase, you're still gonna be hit. So when you say, what about inflation? It's not like, you pointed correctly to interest rate risk for bonds, but I'd argue that a similar kind of risk exists for stocks. We don't typically think of it as interest rate risk, but you still stand to lose your investment in the case of inflation. So it's not like this has incrementally more interest rate risk than that. So if you're worried about the safety of your investment, I still argue that bonds are safer from the investor's perspective. Does that make sense? Okay. Which is more financially lucrative? This is a very simple answer. Yeah, stocks have higher returns. So, yes. Now, the real question is, can anyone tell me the point of my spiel? Because I don't remember. Well, in any case, we went through an exercise. I think it's going to be important. I can't remember where we got started with standard.
Why are bonds better than stocks, or are bonds? Is that what you said?
It could come down to, yeah. Why are bonds more commonly traded than stocks? Yeah, so you can make the case that investors a lot of times are worried about safety, and companies a lot of times are worried about making extra money. So these two forces work towards issuing stocks. There's going to be a lot of investors. There's going to be a lot of the counter argument made, but I would say that a disproportionate share of companies are worried about maximization of profits, and a disproportionate share of investors are, semi-retirees that are worried about safety. So that might be another reason.
So on the balance sheet, would expect to see much more bonds in companies?
Yes, yes. Because typically when you issue stock, you issue it at something like $1 a share. So that's your stock. I issued 100 shares of common stock at $1 each. And there's some surplus, which we call it, which is like the difference between, let's say, the market bought it for $20 a share. But most of the appreciation in the stock takes place off your balance sheet, because you don't have the market value of your stock on your balance sheet. Because you have book value of assets and book value of liabilities, basically. So you have to have book value of stock, which from your perspective is the opposite. But, yeah. Okay. We're getting further from what I wanted to cover today, but that's okay, because we don't have a lot of bonds material, and this is more important, I think, than the material that we do have. So now you guys can do an exercise where you can think about the benefits and detriments of each financial instrument, or each class of financial instruments, from the perspective of the investor and from the perspective of the company. I think that's it. So, we alluded to inflation, and inflation is a very real problem. Figure 12.2 in your book will show you something like this. This is 1970, this is 2010, let's say, and we have, this is a graph of inflation, although it looks like something horrible, I don't know what it is. But this is a graph of treasury yields. And so what we'll see is that for some period of time, around the 70s, inflation was higher than treasury yields. So what does that mean? Can anyone give me an intuitive way of interpreting that? That inflation is higher than what the U.S. government is paying on its securities.
You're losing money.
Yeah, perfect. So I, as an investor, by giving the United States government, the safest entity in the world, my money, I have to pay them to lend them my money. And that's a pretty absurd concept. But that was the case, because the rate at which your dollar was devaluing exceeded the rate that you're getting your money back. So you end up losing money. So it took the Treasury a while. They didn't catch on quite in the 70s. They caught on in the 90s, and they said, we'll offer you this new class of securities. These securities are called Treasury Inflation Protected Securities, or TIPS. So yeah, if you work for the FDIC, it's like there's a whole glossary, about 30 pages at the end of our examination manuals, just acronyms all over the place. They're not going away. But TIPS. So the concept here was that the federal government understands that you should not have to pay the federal government to lend the federal government your money. So what they're going to do is they're going to offer a security that takes into account the rate of inflation. How are they going to do this? Well, the stated coupon rate on their security stays the same. Let's call it 3%. But how do we get the coupon payments? In every other bond we've looked at so far, how do we come up with the coupon payments?
Multiply that by 1,000.
Yes, multiply that by the face value, which in the case of corporate bonds and U.S. government bonds is almost always $1,000. What these TIPS do is they take the multiplier.
Does that say protected or preferred?
Protected. Is it preferred? Is it supposed to be preferred?
No.
Oh, okay. I think it's protected. What TIPS do is they let this multiplier change, okay? And they change this based on the CPI, Consumer Purchasing Index.
Right.
Consumer Price Index, thank you. Yeah, Consumer Price Index, another acronym. And the concept of the consumer price index, this is an important economic concept. It takes a basket of goods. So if you'll think about a nice little picnic basket / sailboat, and you fill this with what households are buying. So you factor in that some portion of this basket is healthcare, some portion of this basket is housing, some portion of this basket is cars, some portion is milk, some portion is sugar, et cetera, et cetera. And so,
Is that a Gucci bag, Louis, or Christian?
depends, how much do you pay for it?
I don't know.
I wouldn't pay much. But yeah, so they
Kinda
take.
like a Coach.
What's that?
Coach.
Well, you got a better fashion sense than me, Sam. I can tell by your head. So we take this basket of goods, and we just see by doing a survey of how much companies are charging for each of these goods. How much are healthcare companies charging for healthcare? How much are houses going for in the market? How much are cars selling for? So every year, every month, we figure out how the dynamics of this basket of goods. And so we come up with a rate of say 2.317%. So when we annualize the rate that this basket of goods changed from February to March, that means when we multiply that by 12, we come up with this rate. That means, in expectation, if inflation keeps going at the rate it's gone over this past month, our money, our purchasing power as consumers will have decreased by 2.317%. And so what we need to do is we need to take this $1,000 principal, and let's say this is an annual rate. Let's say we figure out for the last year, this is what the rate was. We now multiply this principal by 2.317%. So we get $1,000, 23 and 17, let's say, okay? So then when we get our coupon payment for the following year, we don't multiply the 3% by the 1,000 that it started at. We multiply the 3% by the 1,023.17. And as this number keeps going up, our coupon payments are going to keep going up. Does that make sense? That is how the Treasury compensates investors for inflation, if they buy these tips. Jake?
Can you explain one more time how the person is found?
Yes. So, basically, I don't want to overstep my boundaries. I can't tell you exactly how the government comes up with the new prices of goods. I'm pretty sure it's based on a survey of producers, but there might be other ways of doing it. You can do a survey of consumers, you can use reach out. But basically what they do is they find, let's normalize it $1. In 1990 we had $1, so $1 in 1991. Okay? Then this is January 1st, 1990. So we'll say January 1990. Okay? Then we move to February 1990. Okay? And we see that if we wanted to buy the exact same things, this dollar consists of one-fourth housing, one-third car, healthcare, whatever, right? They do this based on the most accurate estimate of how Americans actually spend their money, okay? And how much would it cost to purchase the same amount of goods February 1990? And let's say instead of costing $1, it costs $1.10. So what we do, we figure out that the annualized inflation rate would be 12%. Yeah, but that's just math. So, yeah, does that make sense? And so as this progresses over time, you can see, instead of a 1 year from now inflation rate, we do a 5 year from now inflation effect, and the dollar turns into, $20,000 very quickly. I think if you would have invested $1 in the stock market or $100 in the stock market in 1900, you'd be like $1 million. What's your number right there? This website. Every month. Yep. This is a very important sort of economic variable, and the consumer price index is the best gauge we have for inflation as we're going through. Now later on, you make adjustments and we figure out sort of ex post inflation, but how we figure out what the actual, how our best guess of what the actual inflation rate is this consumer price index.
They do random calls.
They do random calls?
Yeah.
Thanks, this is really helpful, Sam, I appreciate that. Anytime you do fact check me, I encourage you to.
Well,
I'm
no,
like-
not fact checking,
Oh,
it's like sometimes they, I mean, cause I've heard them, they call me before.
Really?
Like call the phone and say, hi, this is blah, 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 we're trying to do it.
So they survey consumers?
Mhm. And I said, I'm not interested, I mean, yeah.
Doing your share to screw over the federal government.
Yep.
Attaboy. Okay, so we've covered Treasury inflation protected securities. And now let's go on to another piece of financial engineering that the US Treasury has come up with. And this is called, also an acronym, STRIPS. And this acronym stands for Separate Trading of Registered Interest and Principal Securities. Quick spelling thing here. Does anyone know how you can remember which word is spelled principally and principal?
Principles
Yes, that's what they told me in grade school.
What did they say?
Your principal wants to be your pal. So when you're talking about the guy who runs a school, it's
Yeah.
principal. When you're talking about financial instruments, it's principally.
Well, here in the book has.
Yeah, it has principal in the book.
Oh.
Really?
Uh-huh.
All right, I gotta revisit that.
Principal securities.
2S, because you want more dessert. That's what they told me, they told me the same lies.
Mm-mm.
Then what's the?
What just happened? I got confused.
Simple spelling.
Oh, I can't do that anyway, so I can't spell for long.
Yeah, you got spell check.
No.
Yes, it does say interest, sorry about that. So separate trading registered interest principles, separate trading of registered interest and principal securities. So what this means is when the federal government issues a 10-year bond, it's gonna have how many coupon payments?
10. No, it'd be 20.
Thank you. But that's okay, I make this thing here. So it's gonna be 20 interest payments, 20 coupon payments, and it's gonna be a principal payment, or a principal payment. And so there's 21 payments altogether. And so what the federal government is gonna do is they're going to sell each of these payments individually as a zero coupon bond. So if the federal government is issued a coupon with a 5% interest rate, that means every payment is gonna be $25, every coupon payment is gonna be $25. That means the 11th coupon payment is also gonna be $25. That means they basically sell this off as a zero coupon bond with a face value of $25 in 5.5 years, because it's the 11th payment. Does that make sense? I just picked a number though. We can do the second payment because it's easier. But that means in a year, you're gonna get $25. So they're gonna sell it to you as its own security, as a zero coupon security. This is the promise by the federal government to pay you $25 a year from now. What are you gonna pay for it today? I don't know, $22, $23, who knows? But, probably significantly more than that. But, they just sell off these, they basically strip the coupons from the principal and sell each payment off individually. So there's going to be 21 securities that come out of this transaction, this 10-year bond. Make sense? Okay? From principal. But they just basically strip each payment into its own security. So, new stuff from the Fed. Okay. The federal government also asks for your money in many different ways. They never stop being creative in how they're getting your money. And
Whoa.
they do this is through federal agencies or government-sponsored entities. Another acronym for you. I think technically there's a distinction between these two terms, but I was looking it up and I couldn't find it. The book uses this term, but they're synonymous basically. So these are, okay, can anyone think of an example of a government-sponsored entity? I'll give you a hint. We talked about them and they definitely contributed to the financial crisis.
MBS.
MBS, what about MBS?
The mortgage-backed securities?
Yes, those are securities.
Fannie Mae.
Yes,
Fannie Mac.
perfect. Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac are great prime examples of government-sponsored entities. They are, in fact, probably the example that most of you have heard of. But you guys have also probably interacted with another example, Sallie Mae. Has anyone heard of Sallie Mae?
Yeah.
Yeah, what does Sallie Mae do?
I don't know.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. So Sallie Mae basically packages up student loans and sells them. So these government-sponsored entities have a fairly simple business model.
So what do you mean, government sponsored? Is the government doing this as far as doing these securities, or are they saying, these guys fell, we got them covered? And we're not part of what they do, but we can cover them.
Exactly.
So-
What are they?
Yeah.
So they are not officially part of the U.S. branch of the government. Yet, they're not necessarily funded, not all government-sponsored entities are funded by taxpayer dollars. But they are institutions that the government heavily subsidizes and the government established these institutions to serve the public good. So there is a strong belief in the market, a belief that has been confirmed in the episode that you alluded to, that if any of these entities are going to go bust, the government will step in and bail them out. And in fact, that's what happened. They secured a $200 billion bailout during the financial crisis when the Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac were going to default on the mortgage-backed securities. And so before we got there, we had to take a few steps. Basically, these GSEs go out and they issue bonds. And investors like you and me pay GSEs money, and they take your money, they borrow it, and what they'll do is they'll go to banks and they will buy a bunch of mortgages from a bunch of banks. So issue bonds, get money. I shouldn't say buy a bunch of mortgages. Buy different kinds of loans. So they're not all residential mortgages. Get money, buy loans, or most mortgages. But like a student loan is a mortgage. So they'll buy loans, and they will package loans, aka securitize, into mortgage-backed securities or other asset-backed securities. And they will sell to investors. Okay. Does this business model make sense to you guys? So, they issue a bond to borrow money from you guys. They invest this money by buying loans from banks. They pay banks money, banks pay them loans. They take these loans, they bunch them up and cut them up and slice them and dice them in whatever way they want, and they create securities.
What does ABS stand for?
Asset-backed securities.
Okay.
Sorry, MBS is mortgage-backed securities, ABS is other asset-backed
Okay.
securities. So like Sallie Mae issues student loan securities. They're not mortgages, so they're There's also asset-backed securities with car loans and probably a handful of other things that I don't know, probably something to do with farming property, I guess. But farming property, you have mortgages. never mind. So they sell these to investors and they make whatever spread they want. No, that's not true. They make a fair spread. Okay. So this is also, the key here has to do with the bond market here. What we call MBS bonds? No, we won't call them MBS bonds. We'll call them MBS. So this is another way that the government takes money by issuing bonds. Okay. Do we all have this written down? Now we get to our best friends that we remember from the exam and from last unit, munis. Yay! So munis, as you'll recall, also issue bonds. What you may or may not recall, they issue two types of bonds. Can anyone tell me one type of bond that municipalities issue? Two distinct classes of bonds.
Revenue?
Yes, revenue bonds. Excellent, no? Okay. And did that jog anyone's memory in what the opposite, but not a revenue bond is called? Yeah, perfect. General purpose or general obligation. Okay. Now, can somebody that has not participated today yet tell me what a revenue bond is issued for?
I participated.
Yeah, you participate. Okay, and if no one can, I'll tell myself then. Revenue bonds are issued and backed by the proceeds of a specific project, okay? They're backed by the revenue from a specific project. So these are your utility bonds. This is what happens when a city wants to improve their sewer district. This is what happens when a city wants to build a new school. They finance that through a revenue bond. And the way they're gonna get enough money to pay back the bondholders is if that project succeeds. So if they raise enough tax revenue in the local municipality to pay off the new school, then you as an investor in that school bond are gonna get your money back. Toll roads are another great example of this. Sometimes governments will issue revenue bonds to build a new bright shiny road, and they'll install tolls on that road. So every time you drive by, you have to pay the toll. Once they take out the operating cuts, paying the toll workers or whatever, then they take that money and they hoard it in a little piggy bank, and eventually when that bond comes to maturity, they take that piggy bank, dump it out. If it's generated enough money, then they pay back the bondholders for that revenue bond, okay?
Are there some revenue bonds that never reach that point?
Yes, yes, in fact,
Cause I feel like how are schools gonna?
well, schools are funded through tax dollars, and also the lottery system somehow. Okay.
I contribute
Contribute to the lottery?
all the time.
I told you guys what accountants call lottery, right?
If I hit, we're gonna be
Is
we're
one
gonna be good.
The lottery? Oh. That's beyond the scope of my finance knowledge. You can ask Sam.
What was the question? Hey, I'm all about scratch offs.
Isn't it like 850 million?
Powerball's at 50 million.
I don't know, I'll buy them anyways. Doesn't
So-
matter. I'm happy if I hit for 1 million.
In contrast, general obligation bonds or general purpose bonds are what happens when the government has no new projects but is like running a deficit, or we're thinking of giving all our employees raises, or we need to somehow or other just generate more money, right? We're not building any tolls, we're not giving you guys a new school, we just want your money. And believe it or not, those bonds are actually safer. Were you gonna say something, Fabian?
No.
Okay, those bonds are safer because instead of just committing the revenue from a particular project towards repaying the investors, General obligation bonds, in contrast, are backed by the taxing authority of that municipality. So as long as that municipality can raise taxes, then you stand a really good chance of getting paid back. Somebody a second ago asked me how risky these bonds are, and I think the statistic in the book was, at least as of 2013, I guess, when this book was published, 0.69% of municipal bonds issued have gone default. So I don't really know. I'm pretty sure that is lower than commercial debt. I'm positive that's higher than U.S. debt, so it goes somewhere in between. Yeah, so general obligation bonds are backed by full taxing authority. So we're gonna write project here, revenue from project, and taxing authority. Okay.
Revenue from
Project.
taxes and
Taxing authority. Okay. 0.63%. That's what I got written down. Now we get to the interesting class of bonds. Corporate bonds. So corporate bonds are more interesting in my opinion because there's more default risk associated with them. So you have to do more fundamental analysis, you have to understand your investment a lot better. People can just throw money into the US government and say, this money I will always be able to take like possibly most of my money back at worst if inflation spikes up super high, but I'll always be able to have most of my money. You can make the same argument with municipalities, except you're admitting a tiny chance of default risk. But with corporate,
so on munis, you said they're general purpose, and they're, like, for example, if they're running a deficit, they bring in money that.
yes, that's one way of funding a deficit, by just issuing a bond. Probably not the fiscal responsibility.
And they get their revenue from the taxing that they do on individuals?
Yes, so you as an investor are gonna get your repayment of that investment from the taxing authority by that municipality. That's a really confusing way of saying what I'm trying to say. What I'm trying to say is that as long as that municipality can increase taxes, they can generate more revenue. And as long as they can generate that revenue, you get a claim on that revenue. So they can't, I mean, they can probably pay their employees or whatever if they're running the super deficit, but then you're the next claimant. So no one's gonna see that before you get it. In contrast, if a municipality, if a state decides to build a tollway, then that state can be doing perfectly fine financially, but that tollway sucks and they're not generating any money from it, and they can choose to default on your loan because they are only obligated to pay you back on that loan based on that project. They've sequestered a certain asset and they say, your revenue comes if this revenue comes.
Usually with those, they're very specific, like they'll actually tell the investors.
Yes,
so
yes,
forth.
absolutely. It's all in the prospectus. Prospectus is a 100+ page document that
And,
no one should
and
ever.
the interest rates would be probably higher on a project.
Yes, absolutely, yeah. It's, one of the fundamental principles of finance, as long as there's, more risk, means more reward. More risk. Okay, so, a few facets of corporate bonds. Okay? This is the most important facet. Corporate bonds are callable. I know a handful of you guys are in investments class, so you have dealt with call options. Excuse me. So you might be able to tell me what a call option is. Can anyone brave that?
Call it back before it matures.
Okay, what does that mean, call back before matures?
Like their interest rate on the market, no, they're graded much better. There's a corporate B with entity, if they're gone from, for example, from B rating to A rating,
Okay.
then they're doing much better, so they'll call back they'll call back those bonds that are, much more expensive.
Mm-hmm.
And sell them again for a lesser price.
Yep, that makes perfect sense.
It's
So,
called
let's
YTCs too, aren't they, as far as yield to call?
say that one more time.
Isn't it called YTC? You guys have taken the classes?
I think it is.
Yeah, there is such a thing as yield to call, because basically yield to maturity assumes that you're gonna hold this investment to maturity. Yield to call assumes that the company is gonna call the bond.
But it's still restricted though, they can't just call it back whenever they want. It's within also the, when you make the contract, they'll say within the next 3 years, we can't call it back, but
Yes.
after 3 years, then it's callable.
So it's, yes, for call options, they're usually, structured in such a way that there's a, let's say this is maturity, there's a period where the entity cannot call the bond, and I'll re-explain one more time exactly what calling means, but anytime after that, it's fair game, okay? They're also structured in such a way that if the corporation decides to call the bond, they're gonna pay a certain price. And that price is almost always gonna be above the face value. It's gonna be maybe the face value plus 2 interest payment, two coupon payments, or the face value plus 4 coupon payments, I don't know. Or just set like, $600 above the face value. But, okay, so going from the top, what the relationship mean, or what callability means is a corporation, when it issues debt, that is, when it gives you a piece of paper and in return you give them money, if that piece of paper has a call option in it, that means that the corporation has the right to buy that piece of paper back from you for a set amount of money, okay? So, this piece of paper, the original terms on it said that you will hold a piece of paper for 10 years, the corporation will pay you 5% interest payments for 10 years, and at the end of 10 years, they will pay you back $1,000. But, in the fine print, this piece of paper said that, or if the corporation, after 3 years, decides that it wants to trade you back the piece of paper for money, then it can call the bond, or buy back the bond, okay? So, as part of a restriction on these call options, you're gonna have this sort of lockout period. The corporation cannot buy the bond back before this lockout period. And you're gonna have a stipulated price, sort of this, you can think of as a penalty, that the corporation has to pay if they decide to exercise that right. Why would we make a corporation incur a penalty to buy back their debt?
Because you're not getting full return on what they promised you.
You are getting full return. So they promised you 10% a year for 10 years. You only got it for 3 years, but you got 10% return.
Because you won't.
And you got your face value back. Listen.
Yes, like you sign that contract, so you wanna give them the penalty, because they didn't, give you the option to keep that on for the time. Yes.
So one way of putting what I think you're saying is that an option has value. This is a financial option. We talked about financial options, real options. Financial options have value, and you're going to demand compensation to write somebody an option, just like if you were to write an option in the derivatives market, someone's going to pay you for that option. The only difference here is this option is ingrained in that piece of paper. It's a 2-for-1. So one way of saying what Elizabeth's trying to say is that you are buying debt and you are also buying an option. So you have to get paid for both. Did anyone have another answer? Ruben?
What is it to just talk about, like slight fluctuations in interest rates?
Yes, and it's not slight fluctuations, because typically if there's slight fluctuations, it won't be worth it for the corporation to call back the bond and incur the prepayment penalty. But if massive fluctuations occur, only then is the corporation going to want to call back the bond. For instance, and Ismail pointed to one of the reasons that the fluctuations might occur. I'll flesh out that one, and I'll give you another reason as well. So let's start with Ismail's example. This corporation was rated, let's say, BB by Moody's. I'm actually not sure if Moody's uses this system. But, yeah, so it was rated sub-investment grade by Moody's, aka junk bond. And what happens is, they had a windfall, they just had this awesome new client come in, and who knows what else happened to their business model, but one of their patents really paid off, and they're making a ton of money hand over fist. So now Moody's comes in and upgrades them to a BBB, which is now investment grade. is there's a huge difference between average typical yields for sub-investment grade or junk bonds and investment grade bonds. And so, whereas the corporation might have been paying, let's say, 7% coupon payments a year for this bond, once their debt gets upgraded, they could issue new debt if they wanted for 4% a year. Okay? When you're talking about issuing, I don't know, $10 million, $20 million worth of debt, that's going to be significant, right? I can't do that, my brain's fried right now. But it's going to be a lot of money that the corporation can get back. So it would be worth it for them to call the bond and issue a new bond for a lower rate. Okay? Yeah, so that's one reason, right? There is another sort of more typical situation about why corporations decide to call bonds. And that is the scenario of general interest rates. So this is the specific interest rate for this particular corporation, you know, the required rate of return that investors have for debt to this corporation out of set maturity. What if all rates in the market go up or go down? In which scenario would a corporation call the debt? Gene, I don't hear your voice enough. You have a great voice. In what scenario would the corporation call a bond? If interest rates move up or if interest rates move down? Sure. So you have two crises, right? You had the inflation crisis in the 70s and 80s, and what happened there is interest rates skyrocket. And in contrast, you have the housing bubble collapse and the subsequent Great Recession, that interest rates plummeted. Okay? In which scenario do you expect most corporations will have called their bonds? In the scenario where interest rates moved up, or in the scenario where interest rates moved down?
We call their bonds means.
Call their bonds means buy back that piece of paper that's, buy back their debt. Remember, the purpose of buying back debt is so you can issue new debt for more favorable pricing.
Oh,
When interest rates go down, actually. So, if you look at it from this scenario, this is sort of a micro bubble case. This corporation, let's say McDonald's, was paying 7% for their debt, but now some news came out that they're actually a better company than people thought, and now they only have to pay 4% for their debt. So to them, interest rates went down. They don't have, why should they pay 7% when the risk in their company is actually worth 4%? So they're gonna buy back all the debt that's already outstanding, that has call options, and they're gonna issue new debt. Okay, does that make sense? And the new debt that they issue, they're gonna issue it at this price. Because again, interest rates are the price of money. Okay? So, Ismail?
So it's just a coupon rate, right? That's what you're talking about?
Yes, that's a coupon rate. Yep, coupon rate is the interest rate. The interest rate that corporations face. The interest rate that investors receive is a little different. It's the yield to maturity. Typically, or it could be yield to call if they're expecting to call, or yield to whenever you're going to hold it. And so, in the general market scenario, market rate movement scenario, what happens is when interest rates fall, that means not just this corporation is going to have to pay less for their debt, but every corporation is going to have to pay less for their debt. So interest rates are falling, and this company comes and buys back their debt. They're going to issue debt at a new price, at a cheaper price. They're going to issue debt at a lower interest rate. But what are you as an investor who was making 7% return going to do now? Well, you were making 7% return, you were happy with that return, but now all the interest rates fell. You can't invest in another company that's going to pay 7%. Or if you do, that company's going to have an astronomical level of risk. You're going to have to invest at a lower rate. And so this is called sort of maturity risk, not quite maturity risk. This is called option risk, and it comes from interest rate risk. If interest rates move unfavorably, if interest rates go down, then the corporation is going to call back their money, they call back their debt, you're going to get your money back, and you're going to have to reinvest that money, and the rate that you're going to get once you reinvest that money is going to be lower than the 7% that you were getting. Does that make sense? So, I will close with this line that I said before. An option is essentially the right, but not the responsibility, to do something to you when you least want it done. So, that corporation is gonna give you back your money when you would much rather that corporation hold your money. Make sense?
Yeah, they're not dummies.
They're not dummies, they're very smart.